What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Slate, the penultimate edition of the Slate here this week. Adam Kaufman, Reed T. Fowler. Hopefully you had the opportunity to catch us earlier today on The Sweat. If you didn't, shame on you. But nevertheless, you found us here and we have much to talk about. We're going to get into gambling odds concerning conference championship weekend, obviously, in the NFL. Maybe a little sneak peek at the very light two-game slate in the NBA tonight. Of course, the Farmers Insurance Open, which Reed has been glued to. And we need to get to something we didn't have a lot of time for this morning, which is news. There's actual news happening in the NFL. But this is, of course, it's the sports edition because we hit on a little bit of everything with our guys, Eamon and Drew, behind the scenes. Reed, how are you, man?
Good. We were talking right before we went on that nothing irks me like the number one golfer in the world parring a par five. And if that's the case, if you're really mulling over a golfer that you have no control over, and that's what you're doing on a Thursday night, then good on you, because you're with me, as opposed to worrying about more important things in the world.
I thought you were going to say, like we were just talking about before we came on, Koff needs to update his Chrome. No, it's all.
And there's a big thing tomorrow, right? There's a big day tomorrow, Koff.
A blizzard in New England?
Not only is it a blizzard, not only is it Friday.
Yeah,
today is your last day in the 30s.
It is. I'm slowly coming to terms with it.
Do your hamstrings hurt when you get out of bed for no reason?
Oh, I've been grunting when I bend down to tie my shoes for years. That's not new.
Do you nod your head in agreement in those Geico commercials where you're turning into your parents?
Yeah. Well, I've also been telling dad jokes for about as long as I can remember, long before I had kids, for sure. So yeah, some of that stuff that. Yeah, that's been chasing me down. Maybe this is what I've been waiting for, Reed. Maybe it's the big 4-0 to get me to start to hit on, the old Peloton or the treadmill. This is what's going to put me over the edge. We'll see. Here's what I do know. I am very comfortable sitting here in this chair talking to you. I'm not looking to move. I'm not looking to go anywhere. But there are many men across the National Football League who are ready to pack up their families and their homes and go elsewhere. We have nine, at least going into yesterday, let's say, head coaching vacancies in the NFL. And already at least a couple have been not finalized, but they're all but done. And then others that are trending in that direction. I kind of, forgive me, because this is more of a sports talk show. So we don't have to do just DFS, just gambling. We can hit on the news. We can dissect things a little bit. I kind of want to go one by one, even if it's just sort of quick hitting, and get your thoughts on what's going on with some of these teams, because let's start with the Broncos here. This is one of the ones that came down late last night, and that is Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers offensive coordinator, at least he was, is the new head coach of the Denver Broncos. So I know that at least immediately on social media, this is what I appreciate about Twitter, because it is sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. It's a good way to connect the dots. Is this going to lead to, boy, maybe Aaron Rodgers will wind up in Denver? Is this going to speed up that process a little bit if he doesn't go back to Green Bay? But what do you think of this move for the Broncos?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think Nathaniel Hackett has a good track record. His CV is obviously well documented with what he's been able to do. And you kind of figure, right, this is going to go into if Aaron Rodgers doesn't end up in Denver, right? It's the child version of Belichick and Brady, because I don't really think Hackett, especially with Rodgers over the last 3 or 4 years, has really been calling a ton of plays. Meaning that Rodgers has a lot of say in what they do. He obviously can call audibles at any point. Matt LaFleur is someone also. Ooh, a little inception here. Matt LaFleur is someone that probably has a lot of say in what these guys do in terms of the offense. But the stats don't lie. And we talk about EPA per play, which is efficiency stat. When you look at the Green Bay Packers offense over the last, I'd say, since 2019, so 3 years, they were 8th. And then they were 1st in 2020 in that historic run for Aaron Rodgers, and they were 2nd this year. So when you take a look at that track record and you have someone like Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, Williams in that backfield, Cortland Sutton, right? Javonte Williams is someone that everybody loved out of college and really performed admirably in his rookie season. And then you got a defense too in Denver that's young, that's obviously without Von Miller, but still a defense that is highly rated and has a lot of good players. And it kind of makes sense, right? The puzzle piece kind of goes together with Aaron Rodgers being someone that you could see there. Having said that, though, is that the right move for Denver over the next, probably, I want to say 3 to 5 years, right? Because that's when you're getting these players like Courtland Sutton that you signed over the last, that you've re-signed, and you have Javonte on his rookie contract. That's what you have to think about as well, because Russell Wilson is still out there as someone that you could see going to Denver. But the Broncos have, and I'm sure Nathaniel Hackett wanted to do this, they have the pieces. Everything is there. We just know that their quarterback scouting has been terrible. So why not go after the incumbent MVP and probably the repeat of MVP in Aaron Rodgers? It makes a lot of sense.
Not just that, Reed, but just when you're a first-time head coach in any sport, but let's just focus in on the NFL, obviously.
Yeah,
teams are impatient, and when I say that, I mean owners. Owners are look at what happened all those years in Cleveland, where it felt like they were getting a different head coach every year, at most 2 years, and it was just a revolving door. Like the Giants right now are looking for their 4th head coach since Tom Coughlin left only 5-6 years ago. So this thing, people want results. It's a results-driven business like anything else, and they want results quickly. If you're a guy like Nathaniel Hackett, assuming, and I don't know, but if he has a good relationship, with Aaron Rodgers as his former offensive coordinator, if they're 2 peas in a pod, unlike some of the people that Rodgers has worked with over the years in Green Bay, then this is just such a no-brainer to you, because it's not like you're taking over a situation where, you've got whomever it is, like you're going to Jacksonville and you've got a Trevor Lawrence. You're not going to look to bring in Russell Wilson or something like that. Whoever it is that takes over the Jaguars,
right?
You have your guy. You have your number 1 pick who's only a year into the league. You're going to Denver and you're looking at this and you're saying, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock. Like, I could draft a guy, I guess, but no, like, give me Aaron Rodgers. Of course, give me, the potential MVP of the league in a win now situation. I'm only concerned about the next 2-3 years for the sake of my job security. And that's all this guy's got left anyway.
Right, exactly. And Pat Shurmur's their offensive coordinator right now, right, in Denver. And what has he done? Right. We see that offense be pretty pathetic, to be honest, when it comes to the players that they have on that team. And I'm talking about Denver, with those receivers. And everyone scratched their head and saying, why are they re-signing these guys at such large contracts like Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick? It's because you're setting up the pieces, right? And we know Aaron Rodgers. Well, we think we know Aaron Rodgers.
To the extent that anyone other than Pat McAfee knows Aaron Rodgers.
But what we can glean from just observing him in his day-to-day when he does interviews, and he's said it, he's been pretty candid about kind of opening up this year, or being more true to himself and who he is. He's a mercurial person. Like, he is someone that is sort of an enigma and is very cerebral. And why not get the guy that has been with Rodgers for the last handful of years to know not just what he's thinking and what he's not thinking, but to make sure that transition is frictionless.
Yeah,
like how you mentioned, right? Because how long Rodgers also doesn't want to go to a rebuild in terms of his relationships, of trying to get someone to understand his approach to the game, right? Now, how quickly does that happen if he were to go to Denver, or if he goes somewhere else? That's the multi-million-dollar question of, can he do what Tom Brady did, which is go to a new team that has a lot of incumbent skill players that are really, really, really efficient and really well suited for his offense. Can he get that going? Because in the AFC West, you got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. Derek Carr is someone that we might not know where he's going. If he stays, fine, but if the Raiders do something with him and they trade him away, they could probably get a bounty for him of what he did this season. Those are 2 quarterbacks in Herbert and Mahomes that you got to stick with. And the AFC West starts to become a powerhouse. Does Rodgers want to do that, right? 6 games out of the year, or 4 games, let's call it 4.5, 5 games out of the year, where he's got to play against probably 2 of the top 8 quarterbacks right now, top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. That's the other thing too, is that, and does he want to go to another cold weather climate? I mean, like, he's been playing at Lambeau Field for so long, and Brady's like, I'm not playing in the cold anymore. That's
I'm
stupid.
done.
I'm done. Right? Maybe he wants to go to a warm weather team. I don't know. I don't really think there's a lot out there that need a quarterback, but like there's a lot of things, right? But yes, this does seem like the move that precedes the big one, which is trying to lure number 12 to the 303.
You mentioned the Raiders, the AFC West. It's not a done deal by any stretch, but let's go there because latest reports, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, both just in the last little while this afternoon, have potentially, quite frankly, a new general manager who hasn't even been hired yet, winning an internal power struggle that suddenly became public. And what I mean by that is we have had very up and down reports with respect to whether former, or at least current, I should say, Patriots executive and really kind of a right-hand man to Bill Belichick, Dave Ziegler, whether or not he would be the favorite to take over as general manager there for Las Vegas. And it seemed like latest reports out of the Athletic as of last night before today was this is not going in that direction. They're sort of punting and looking in a different direction. Then all of a sudden in the last hour or so, it's no, not only is Ziegler the favorite for this job, now Josh McDaniels, who has never really gotten even any interest from the Raiders, has been requested or will be requested for an interview from New England, the offensive coordinator and former Broncos head coach and almost Indianapolis Colts head coach. Now he's suddenly not only positioned to interview with the Raiders, he's the favorite to get the job, assuming the interview goes well. So it's looking like a tandem package from New England is going to be heading to Vegas, basically, as long as this thing doesn't go sour. This is near and dear to your heart as a Raiders fan, but even just someone who surveys the NFL, is this a good move bringing in these two guys if it ends up happening? And do you believe it's going to happen?
Well, I think from a standpoint of not only look, coaching trees from Belichick have never panned out. I think that's well documented. Yeah. Right. There's been a handful, I would argue.
Two just lost their jobs.
Right. But Brian Flores, right, Mike Vrabel, I would argue in the shorter time frame for Flores, maybe a little bit longer for Vrabel, they've done the best of any of these guys, right? And
although I'd argue I got into this conversation with someone earlier. Sorry to cut you off. I would argue Mike Vrabel isn't even a Belichick disciple. Yes, he played for him all those years, but he coached in, he was an assistant where? Kansas City? Like that's, he never coached in the New England system. He didn't learn up close under Belichick that way. Of course, you observe as a player and a leader and a captain and all that stuff. But in terms of like getting your footing wet as a coach, I don't know. I don't put him on the Belichick tree, to be honest.
Yeah, same. And I think that you have to divorce some of that narrative if you're looking at what the Raiders currently need, which is a cultural shift of how things are done and operated. It was so toxic with Mayock and with Gruden, mostly with the latter saying, I want to be in control of this team. I know what's best. And there's, again, reports with Gruden and Mayock saying that Gruden wanted Clelin Ferrell at number 4 and Mayock wanted, Devin White, who's a linebacker right now in Tampa Bay, as opposed, and we see what those two players have become. Like Clelin Ferrell is basically, riding pine, and Max Crosby is the guy in the 3rd round that has become that superstar on the defensive line. So that's one example of how do you structure your just the franchise, right? Your company, your hierarchy, and you finding a GM and finding a coach that know each other well, that have proven to scout what teams need in terms of quarterbacks, in terms of how to operate an offense that has been dominant for the last 20 years with a quarterback that's, I would argue, not similar to Tom Brady by any stretch in Derek Carr, but has shown the proclivity and the propensity to, be a player to take chances in the right spots and then win these big games when the chips are sort of stacked against him. So I don't mind it at all, right? You're taking that cultural fit or that cultural experience of this is how to stabilize like a chaotic situation, and now put that superimpose that into Vegas, where we've seen now not just from the football on the field, but what it's like for players off the field. You need someone to be a stabilizing factor. And this is not just true of Las Vegas. This happens in South Beach. It can happen in LA. It can happen in any of these big metropolises, but you need someone to stabilize it. And that's, I think, what you want for the Raiders is for the next 5, how many years, can you establish a culture where it's guys are accountable, they're responsible for their actions, and there's, no BS. I honestly thought, though, that Josh McDaniels would stay until Belichick calls it quits. And maybe this is the reading the tea leaves here.
But for how long?
Right, exactly. Is Josh McDaniels may look at this situation and say, do I want to be under Belichick for the next 10, 5, 6, 7 years?
Right.
To where
Belichick's
Josh
he's going to
McDaniels
turn 70, but still, he could have another 5 years in
right.
there.
And Josh McDaniels, the allure of him probably will die down at that point, right? Where you're going to get a new batch of offensive coordinators, and he might miss his chance. So I don't mind it at all.
Well, the other thing is too, the sort of I'm trying to think of the right word for it. The Brady allure, if you will, all those years of success, obviously, that Josh McDaniels and Tom Brady had together, almost 2 decades, like you said, that wears off with time, especially as Brady goes and has success in Tampa. And then it's Mac Jones with, I think, a very good rookie year. But let's say what we just saw from him, and I don't believe this, but let's say that what we just saw from him is his ceiling. And he's just, really no better than an Andy Dalton kind of type. And then, and Josh McDaniels is coaching that for the next 3-4 years. And it's going to be, maybe Josh McDaniels isn't what we thought he was, because, and that was actually all Tom Brady. So, if ever there were a good time to get out and try and spread your wings again, I would think it's now for McDaniels. The other thing that I would add to that, because you were talking about the failure of, in large part, the Belichick coaching tree, which is obviously accurate, unless you want to include like Nick Saban being successful in Alabama. You look at guys like, whether it's Joe Judge most recently. I really don't even think Brian Flores did a poor job. I think he got a raw deal in Miami, but let's just include him because he lost the job. Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien in Houston, Eric Mangini, there are so many others.
Charlie
and for the most part, a lot of these guys, though, didn't, or at least have yet to get that second opportunity. And I do believe, look at Belichick. Like, Belichick failed in Cleveland, and he's, done what he's done in New England. I think McDaniels, whether it's Vegas or somewhere else, and we've been talking about this for years as it relates to McDaniels, wherever he does get that second chance, I feel like you have to learn from the first failed one about, what went well, what you would do again, and, what didn't go well in terms of maybe trying to imitate Belichick too much and not really being able to build a similar program because you're not at your truest in your heart, that personality. Like, that works for Bill because that's Bill. That's not you. And so, I think that could be beneficial for the Raiders if in fact it's McDaniels as well. Yeah.
And this is a quarterback league. I mean, that is probably the most obvious and like Captain Obvious statement that I'm going to say for the next 20 years, that the NFL is a quarterback league. And these head coaches, right, what they're deciding is when they're going to these new, if the coaches are free agents, so to speak, they want to see, A, what's the salary cap like? How does the owner want to spend money, or the GM want to spend money? And then C, can we get a franchise quarterback in here, either when I'm already established or before I even come in, right? Because whatever that coaching job is going to be, and that might have been the downfall of Brian Flores, right? That he wanted Justin Herbert, but the Miami Dolphins wanted Tua Tagovailoa, right? We'll never know that for sure. But same thing with Josh McDaniels, right? You're going to be tied to your quarterback for as long as you live, whether it's like if he goes to the Raiders, or let's say he goes to the Texans, who's that quarterback going to be? And that's going to decide where then, if you have, let's just call it the next 10 years, what your second job is going to be. You're going to be evaluated on who your quarterback was if you went to the draft and picked up a new one, or if you had someone like a Derek Carr who you sculpted to be a top 5 quarterback. That's going to matter for Josh McDaniels. So when you look at Vegas, same thing with teams down in Florida, right? There's no income tax. It's a spot where a lot of these free agents would potentially want to go. There's a lot of endorsement deals that come along with being there, right? Being close to the West Coast and Hollywood and LA. That's an allure for football players everywhere. So that's also something too that you have to figure out is what's the allure if you go somewhere else to get these free agents, as opposed to not. And I think Vegas is one that is high up there because of their situation currently.
Interesting to note from chapter 2. We won't talk about it right now. If it ends up happening, we can get into it, but just to to pass along the information. If McDaniels, of course, the Pats OC, winds up as the head coach in Vegas, that would position Bill O'Brien, who I mentioned before, who is currently the OC and quarterbacks coach at Alabama under Saban, to come back to the NFL, go back to New England, work under Belichick again, tutor Mac Jones. I just think that would be a really interesting and obviously familiar story. But like I said, if it happens, we'll get into it. Right now, it's just sort of fodder. But another guy who expects to be a head coach based on everything that is out there, and that is the Colts defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus. If I'm saying that incorrectly, blame Rap Sheet. Ian Rappaport is the guy that I heard say it. But he led a top 10 defense during his 4 years with Indy. He's now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. What do you make of the move?
If you're Justin Fields, kind of scratching your head.
Yeah, that was my first thing too.
I believe Ryan Pace, I think he's out, right? Like the GM for Chicago.
Yeah.
And look, that's the one thing that I worry about is what's the maturation and the process of making Justin Fields your franchise quarterback. Now, if they bring in someone, who's not Matt, or someone who's not the Matt Nagy type and can get Justin Fields in a position that increases the win rate of Chicago, because boy, do they need it. They've been bad for a long time. That's the one thing that worries me about this hire. Just because you have a defensive coordinator doesn't mean that you can't have a good quarterback or you can't have a good offense. It's how do you build around that? And currently right now, this move makes you scratch your head just a little bit. Brian Dabble is still out there. I don't know what it is about this guy. Maybe like there's something that we don't know that these coaching or these owners and football teams, organizations know about him, but he's still out there right now. And that's the one guy that I would circle and highlight and say, let's get him in this, as like the first or the last person to interview, because I want to mark everyone near to where he is. Look at the game. Look at in terms of the Buffalo Bills this year and their play calling was so much better night and day compared to last season to this season in terms of positive EV plays with Josh Allen. Like it's something that you have to appreciate and respect out of an offensive coordinator to be able to adjust. And most coaches don't, Kyle. We see this all the time, and especially with Matt Nagy this year, is that you will not adjust. And they're so prideful in saying, you have to be a successful player in my system. Brian Dabble seems like the guy, because this is all I know is speculation, seems like the guy that says, you're this type of player, let's fashion our offense around you. And that's something that I thought Chicago would want with a guy like Justin Fields. So it's all right. I think Eberflus was someone that had, was on the short list of head coaches last year, right? And so I think it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get a head coaching job this year. It's just, right, Chicago doesn't really, like they're not moving the needle for me right now. If Aaron Rodgers leaves that division, it opens up a little bit though, obviously.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would have expected an offensive guy. I was scratching my head when I saw it, regardless of, taking nothing away from Matt Eberflus, whether it was him or another DC, just the fact that it was a defensive coordinator going to Chicago, I was like, is that really the top need there that the Bears need to worry about? But, we'll see. Offensive minded guy, defensive minded guy. We'll see how it works out. You mentioned Brian Daboll, of course, who is the, currently the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. He's getting a second interview with the Dolphins, along with Cowboys OC Kellen Moore and Niners OC Mike McDaniel. So it's very clear they want to go in that direction. The indications that are out there publicly anyway are that Daboll would seem to be the favorite for Miami, just because, he already has a pre-existing relationship with Tua Tagovailoa. He was his OC at Alabama before he got elevated back to the NFL. So is that the landing spot that you ultimately see for Daboll? Do you like somebody else from Miami better?
No, I think that's right. And look, he knows that division as well.
Yeah. 3 teams down, 1 to go.
Right, exactly. And so that's also a plus. You're getting sort of a masterclass of experience when you're playing the AFC East. So I like it. I mean, the same thing, right? This goes back to our initial question with tying up the OC with the quarterback. If that's the synergy, to use a word that is overused, that you want to really focus on, then yeah, absolutely, right. And again, you talk about what Miami did this offseason to put pieces around Tua Tagovailoa, and Tua played a lot better than people expected, right? From a statistical standpoint, yes, the schedule was easy for him down that stretch when they were winning 6-7 games in a row. But that's what you lean on. That's what you learn on. And this year, you're finally figuring out, okay, Tua, maybe he's not the apex of what we want him to be at, but maybe Brian Daboll is the guy that gets him across that threshold. I still think Tua is a fine quarterback, and I still think Miami is a team that you have to reckon with because of the foundational pieces that they have, not just on offense, but a young defense as well. So I actually really like it. Like I mentioned, Brian Daboll would be my first choice of any team.
We can combine a couple of these teams here, the Saints, the Jaguars, because, both obviously talking to a litany of people. The Saints defensive coordinator Dennis Allen internally is considered the favorite right now to replace Sean Payton, who I think surprised some by not retiring, but stepping away. Maybe he'll return to the NFL, but it won't be this year anyway, at least maybe in the broadcast booth, but not on the sidelines. They're also interviewing Lions OC Aaron Glenn, as well as Bucks OC Brian Leftwich, who I don't need to tell you, our guy Emerson Latzia is just tweeting up a storm, hoping and praying that Leftwich returns home to Jacksonville to take over the Jaguars. And now Vic Fangio, who once led the Broncos, is in the mix. Which direction are these two clubs going to go? And really, what's going on with the Jags in general? Why hasn't this gotten done now that, especially since now that Nathaniel Hackett is out of the mix?
I mean, as a Raiders fan, you start to not, like you said, the exception to the rules when your organization does something beneficial. and looks at it from a holistic standpoint, and everyone's a coach from the couch, right? Like everybody thinks that they can play or coach from their couch, and that's usually not the case. 99.999% of people will not be able to cut it in the NFL as a player, as a coach, as an owner, as a GM, as an executive, period, full stop. Having said that, there are teams that will perpetually be teams that shoot themselves in the foot. And the Jacksonville Jaguars right now are, because they haven't showed us anything outside of normal operating procedure of hiring someone like Urban Meyer and doing this whole song and dance. Maybe Khan wants to get Leftwich on the cheap. I have no idea. And look, who even knows if Leftwich is a good coach? Maybe he's not impressing in these interviews. We have no idea. Right. And they take away what Latzia is saying on Twitter. He doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to getting Leftwich with Jacksonville. Because look, if Jacksonville loses 3 or 4 games in a row, I will bet every dollar that I have in my bank account, which is not much, that Latzia will say, I'm done with Byron Leftwich.
Yeah, exactly.
But at this stage in the game, right, Koff, how many guys are left? How many coaches are left? If you feel like some sort of pull towards Byron Leftwich, why keep on, meandering on this? Get him in the organization now so he can establish himself and you can start, running instead of just walking when the offseason really comes to fruition. So, with the Saints too, look, in terms of their offense, they were number 1, number 2, top 5 for, 6-7 years with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. You're going to see a precipitous downfall from the Saints right now because I'm sure Alvin Kamara, I'm sure Mike Thomas, and all these skill players are not going to be, especially those two, want to be part of a rebuild, and they got no quarterback. So that scares me quite a bit. For Saints fans who are some of the best out there, hey, now is your time to, be in the rebuild. You guys had a pretty good run with number 9 and number 41 and 13 all playing at a high level. It might be time for you guys to hopefully sit on your hands and just wait.
So this Cowboys situation to me is fascinating because you saw me, I was tweeting about this earlier, talking to you about it earlier. I find it really interesting because I feel like we're already looking into the future, because remember, this is not a team that's currently looking for a head coach. They do have a head coach that's arguably on the hot seat in Mike McCarthy, coming off of, a couple of disappointing seasons for one reason or another. His first year was kind of out of his control. It's a COVID year. Dak goes down in week 5. Disaster followed, but this year, they lost. It wasn't like they were beaten. They lost, this year, unfortunately for them. And so Dan Quinn, their defensive coordinator, of course, a longtime head coach with the Falcons, was primed to move on, not unlike OC Kellen Moore, who we were just talking about. And I don't know how many teams he actually spoke with, but I know he was requested anyway to interview with 6 teams, a half dozen teams. And it looked like he was basically going to have his choice. Like he was the domino. And then he decided, you know what? I'm going to stay in Dallas, at least for another year. And so this could have gone down one of 2 ways in my mind. One, Jerry Jones said, we're going to pay you a little bit more. You know, you're going to be a very, very, very well compensated coordinator, at least with respect to the rest of the NFL. Don't go anywhere. We feel like we might need you. Or 2, you know, he's looking at it and saying, man, next season starts to go sideways even a little bit. These guys get impatient. Mike McCarthy's gone. I like this situation with this defense and Dak and these offensive weapons better than anything else that's out there in terms of these vacancies right now. And I'm already here. I'm going to stick around and see how this plays out because I could be the guy here, at least assuming they don't call Sean Payton first.
Yeah. And that last part, we know that Jerry Jones has been, you know, closely tied with Sean Payton. And I'm sure, and I don't know if there's any tampering rules with coaches and owners, but I'm sure they've talked about this quite a bit. Right? Like it just makes a lot of sense. And the fact that Sean Payton says, I'm not retiring, I'm just chilling for a year, taking a little sabbatical. I love that. I absolutely love that. I think you should have did it last year, right? When Drew Brees left, why not leave with Drew Brees? Right? Sure. I mean, look what the Saints did this year. Absolutely nothing. And that defense, you saw when they got healthy towards that middle late part of the season, Koff, they were a wrecking ball. They had a lot of turnover luck, a ton. So I think that regresses. If I were Dan Quinn, I think you take a look at the situations out there, right? The Giants, the Jaguars, the Bears, right? Like outside of Denver, there wasn't really, in my mind, a spot like the Dolphins, a spot that if you're Dan Quinn, that you want to go to, right? Like that would be better, like you mentioned, than Dallas. We know that Dallas cannot get past this, you know, first week of the playoffs hump. They just can't. And, you know, if Mike McCarthy is going to be the same old 10-7, 9-8 type of coach that he's been with, you know, without Aaron Rodgers, then I'm sure Jerry Jones is going to say, enough's enough, get out of here. You lied in your interview a couple of years ago. You didn't watch every single play, right, when you said you did. So get out of here. We know, look at this defense. Dallas pressured the quarterback in the 4th highest in the NFL. And so he now knows he has a shoo-in to be one of the leading candidates for that head coaching job when that comes to bear. We know that will eventually happen. Mike McCarthy is not going to be the coach unless they win the Super Bowl, which I don't see happening. They have the players, but I don't see it happening. He's going to be out the next 1 to 2 years. And Dan Quinn, like you mentioned, has got a pretty good setup right now.
So we didn't hit on every opening, but we hit on a lot of this stuff. We only have another 5 minutes or so left in the show, but I think it was important to touch on all that news. I'll mention, we won't go deep dive into this, but obviously the retirement earlier today and expected retirement of Ben Roethlisberger of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So 18 years in the league, 2 Super Bowl wins, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff, you know, top 5 in history in passing yards, at least for now. He's done. What's the future in Pitt, though? Is Mason Rudolph going to get a real chance to be this team's starter? He was a 3rd-round pick only a few years ago in 2018. You know, you got Dwayne Haskins buried there as well. If he's even back next year, I'm not sure. Or does this team make a move for another guy or even in the draft?
Wow, boy. If you're a Steelers fan, you might need to put that terrible towel over your face because Mason Rudolph is not it. I know you're probably going to search from within because look, the draft right now, it's not worth spending a top draft pick for any of these quarterbacks. The kid out of Pittsburgh is fine. I know Samir loves Jada Pinkett Smith, whatever his name is.
Hail to Pitt.
HTP. He's fine. Like he's a fine quarterback and he has that build, that archetype that you want, but I don't think you're spending a 1st-round draft pick on him at all. And so you're going to look internally because you've already spent money. That's what you have. And he has not been a good quarterback by any stretch. And so I'm a little bit worried. You take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a stranglehold on this division. Baltimore Ravens, they were hit with the injury bug more times than not. They should be back. And the Cleveland Browns, you know, they're going to Cleveland. Who knows if Baker Mayfield's going to be back. So the Steelers, you got a long road ahead of you. I just don't see that's the case. And look, who's the best free agent quarterback out right now? Outside of these guys that you could trade for, like a Russell Wilson, you're not going to get an Aaron Rodgers. That's not happening in the slightest.
Right.
So who's the best? Marcus Mariota? Right. Like I just don't see any quarterback really, A, making a huge difference, or B, wanting to go to Pittsburgh right now. So it's going to be a little bit tough for them.
We've been talking all week long, and we'll continue to tomorrow on the Sweat about conference championship weekend and the two games that we have in front of us. The DraftKings Sportsbook, of course, with this first game on Sunday in the AFC, has the Bengals as 7-point underdogs in Kansas City here, and a high total. Everyone's all hyped up about the offense, 54.5 points. I still feel like some of this stuff, some of these numbers are going to move depending on which way the money pushes, obviously. It just sort of, honestly, Reed, it makes me a little sad that Kansas City is favored by a full touchdown against the Bengals. I feel like we're not, one, properly recognizing what the Bengals have done so far this year and into the postseason. We're not, I know it's in KC, so you got a little bit of, you got to throw them a few points, but, to call this a touchdown game, I don't know if that feels bigger. I like the under here.
Yeah, I like the under as well. I'm not too bullish on these teams repeating what they did in the latter part of this regular season. Kansas City looked really, really good, obviously, against Buffalo. They looked really good against Steelers, like every other team. And they put up 40 points in 3 of like their last, 6 or 7 games. And they put up over 30 points in like the other 3 or 4 of those games.
Right.
So, right, like you do like that. And I think,
but how many points did they allow?
Right, exactly. So you like the argument of the over. It's fine. Like, it makes sense. It fits perfectly. But if you're Cincinnati, that's not how you're going to win. You're not going to win that game. Because if you remember that first match between Cincinnati and Kansas City was en route to a dominating performance. And then Jamar Chase went off for 200 plus yards and 47 touchdowns in that game. And they got some questionable calls go their way, right? Those are outlier events. And so when you're looking at this in standard operating of like reversion to the mean, it is, in my opinion, Kansas City getting a touchdown because of how this offense sets up against this defense. This defense is not good against the run, and no one can stop Travis Kelce on this team. No one. And if that's the case, you're going to focus on Travis Kelce, and no one can stop Tyreek Hill. Like, I get that Cincinnati beat this team earlier in the season, but I don't see that happening. I have the Chiefs winning, by more than this. I don't mind taking the Chiefs right now, just because of what they're doing, right? Patrick Mahomes is taking what the defense is giving him. And when the defense lulls and like goes to sleep a little bit, then it's a team that really, puts their foot on the gas. And Jerick McKinnon has become now, guys, that like Alvin Kamara type player, right? Where he's getting used as a receiver and a runner in the backfield. So I think Cincinnati's run is over. I think it's fantastic what they've done. I love Joe Burrow. I think he's going to be a really, really good quarterback. Kansas City is playing some of their best football right now.
We've only got another minute or so, but let's talk Niners-Rams. That game, of course, the later game on Sunday, and that's a 3.5-point favorite, the Rams, who I guess I'm late to the party, Reed. After all the preseason hype, the Stafford, acquisition, and then getting Von Miller and, Odell Beckham Jr. and like the loading up. I'm finally buying in. I'm finally buying into the Rams. I was not terribly impressed by them throughout the year. We talked a lot about them along the way, but I certainly, and this is not a hot take, I believe they're going to win this game, and I'm finally taking them seriously, I guess is what I'm saying.
You're buying at the top here, huh, Kyle?
Yeah, that's right. Just the right time.
Yeah. Look, I get, right, the sentiment on the Rams that you're not really buying it because you haven't seen it yet. And Stafford, fine, like he's a good quarterback, but in terms of winning, and that's what we have to do, right? You have to put away your predispositions of what a good quarterback is, especially New England fans, because you got the best for 20 years. There can be good quarterbacks that aren't named Tom Brady. Sure. So when you talk about that, then you like the Rams. I like them. I've talked ad nauseum that they're my team in the preseason to win the whole thing because of their total team. This is before Von Miller and OBJ. Having said that, I like the 49ers to cover in this game, but not win. And here's why. The 49ers don't blitz. And when you blitz Matt Stafford, he tears you apart. And the 49ers, they've run about 60% run plays against the Rams this season. The Rams can't really stop the run that well, and they mitigated Aaron Donald's effect on the game. So I do like them to keep it close, but I still think the Rams win this.
All right, we got to get out of here. You got another Madden simulation coming your way in just a few minutes on the DraftKings YouTube and Twitch pages. Make sure you check that out, obviously. And, we call it the All Sports Edition, but man, there was a lot of good football talk in there. To throwing it back, going deep dive into some of these teams and coaching moves and rumors and all of it. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. So we thank you for being here with us. The slate, of course, comes back tomorrow, same time, same place. You will have Glash, Brendan Glasheen, Matt LaMarca, Steve Buchanan, all with you for one last time, taking into conference weekend. And of course, conference championship talk coming up on the Sweat tomorrow, 11 Eastern. Make sure you join us. I'll be there. I'm sure Reed will be there. So be with us. Thanks to Eamon. Thanks to Drew. Reed, I'm Adam. We'll see you later. Enjoy the night.